Darwin Bagshaw. Bagshaw was 14 years old when he brutally murdered his 15-year-old girlfriend, Ann Kasperzak, in Utah. The case gained national coverage, later featured on true crime programs, due to the young age of the couple, the horrific nature of the attack, and the false pregnancy scare that triggered the crime. Darwin Bagshaw grew up in Riverton, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City, where he attended local schools. Outwardly, he lived a relatively normal teenage life and had no prior history of violent behavior. During his later trial, his defense team noted that he struggled with substance abuse and was actively under the influence of drugs around the time of the homicide. Following the murder, his family relocated to Grand Junction, Colorado, where he quietly resumed his high school studies for over 2 years, acting like a normal student while hiding a dark secret. Ann Kasperzak was a bright 15-year-old high school student from Riverton, Utah. Described by her family as a loving, hopeful girl, she was navigating a complex teenage relationship with Bagshaw. The crime occurred on the evening of March 10, 2012. Anne mistakenly believed she was pregnant with Bagshaw's child. She wrote a note to her parents stating she was running away, and she met up with Bagshaw along the Jordan River Parkway Trail. She told him about the pregnancy and suggested they run away together to raise the baby. Panicked by the prospect of becoming a father at 14 and angry about the situation, Bagshaw lured Anne down to an isolated spot on the riverbank. He severely beat the girl, using a heavy construction shovel to strike her repeatedly in the head and face. Prosecutors later stated that her final moments were spent on her knees, desperately pleading for her life. An autopsy by medical examiners later revealed that she was not actually pregnant. Bagshaw pushed her body into the Jordan River, where it was discovered by a passerby the next day. The investigation was heavily derailed for 2 years because a local woman gave police a fraudulent tip that led to the wrongful arrest of two ex-convicts. Once those men were cleared, detectives focused back on phone records and physical evidence linking Bagshaw to the scene. The kid was finally arrested in October 2014 in Colorado. While held in a juvenile facility, he confessed the entire murder to a fellow cellmate, providing details only the killer would know, which sealed the prosecution's case. Because of the calculated and exceptionally vicious nature of the crime, the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office successfully fought to certify Bagshaw to stand trial as an adult. On February 29, 2016, just a week before his adult jury trial was scheduled to begin, 18-year-old Bagshaw entered a surprise guilty plea to first-degree felony murder. On April 25, 2016, a judge handed down his punishment, labeling the beating unspeakably vicious and cruel. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Before being led away, he offered a brief, quiet apology to Anne's family, saying, "I'm very sorry for this." Following his sentencing, Bagshaw was transferred directly into the adult state prison system under the Utah Department of Corrections. In July 2016, the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole reviewed his file to establish his long-term institutional timeline. Due to the severity of the first-degree murder charge and the years he spent hiding his culpability, the board issued a strict ruling. Bagshaw was denied an early release track and was ordered to serve a minimum of 2 decades before receiving a face-to-face evaluation. He remains securely incarcerated at the Utah State Prison. The parole board officially scheduled his very first formal parole consideration hearing for October 2034, at which point he will be 37 years old. Clifford Baker. Baker was 15 years old when he carried out a shocking, unprovoked double homicide in southern Illinois, which later became a key case in the legal debate over mandatory life sentences for juveniles. Clifford Baker grew up in Lugoti, Illinois, a tiny unincorporated community in Fayette County. Due to his young age at the time of the offense, detailed records of his high school studies and academic background remain mostly sealed under juvenile privacy laws. Investigative reports and subsequent appeals noted that Baker had a troubled and highly unstable background leading up to the crime. John Michael Mike Mahon, 60, and Deborah Tish, 53, were a well-loved couple living in Lugoti. Family members and neighbors described them as exceptionally kind, active, and peaceful people who completely enjoyed life and loved to fish. They lived near Baker and had no known animosity or disputes with the teenager. The double murder occurred during the early morning hours of August 4, 2010. 15-year-old Baker sneaked into his neighbor's home while the couple was asleep. Armed with a gun, he walked into their bedroom and fatally shot both Mahon and Tish multiple times in the head. Immediately after executing his neighbors, he fled the scene and broke into another home down the street. Once inside, he physically assaulted a female resident, punching her in the eye. The woman's husband woke up, confronted Baker, and forced him out of the house. Police captured the teenager a short time later. Following his arrest, he fully confessed to investigators that he had shot Mahon and Tish. Because of the severity of the double homicide, Baker was automatically transferred to adult court under Illinois juvenile law. Following a jury trial, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of home invasion. On September 30, 2011, Fayette County Circuit Judge Michael McHaney sentenced the 16-year-old to mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole. Baker's legal team appealed the sentence based on historical U.S. Supreme Court rulings, which deemed mandatory life without parole sentences for juvenile offenders unconstitutional. In 2015, the Illinois Appellate Court threw out the life sentence, ordering a new discretionary sentencing hearing. On April 3, 2017, Baker returned to court. While he expressed public remorse for his actions, the judge determined his crimes still merited extreme punishment. He was handed an aggregate sentence of 85 years in prison, which the judge openly characterized as a de facto life sentence. Under strict Illinois truth in sentencing laws for first-degree murder, inmates must serve 100% of their sentences. Baker has continued to challenge his de facto life sentence through the state appellate system, claiming that an 85-year term violates constitutional protections for juveniles by failing to offer a realistic opportunity for release. However, his convictions remain firmly upheld, and he is projected to remain incarcerated for the remainder of his natural life. Andrew Balser. Andrea Balser, born Andrew Balser, was 17 years old when she brutally stabbed her parents and a family dog to death inside their main home on Halloween in 2016. The case made headlines nationally due to Balser's subsequent transition to female and claims that gender identity suppression fueled the horrific acts. Balser grew up in a comfortable household in Winthrop, Maine, alongside an older brother, Christopher. Balser was widely described as academically gifted and pull ahead in school, maintaining excellent grades. Court documents noted that despite a seemingly normal childhood, Balser was very socially stunted and emotionally restricted. She had no prior criminal record of history of disciplinary issues. Relatives, teachers, and acquaintances later testified that there was absolutely no warning signs or clues that Balser was capable of severe violence. Antonio Balser and Alice Balser, both 47 years old, were respected and active members of the Kennebec County community. Antonio was a retired U.S. Coast Guard veteran and a popular local chaplain for a motorcycle club, while Alice was known for her local charity work. Following the murders, extended family members and the couple's eldest son, Christopher, fiercely disputed the killer's claims of parental abuse or intolerance, stating that the parents were incredibly loving, gentle, and ultimately accepting. The killings took place around 1:30 a.m. on October 31, 2016, inside the family's home. Balser retrieved a military-style survival knife and walked into her parents' room. When Alice went to give her child a hug to comfort her, Balser stabbed her in the back 9 times, killing her. Antonio Balser woke up to the sounds of his wife's screams and rushed to investigate. Balser attacked him in the hallway, stabbing him over a dozen times. He collapsed dead onto the floor. The family's pet Chihuahua began barking frantically during the struggle. Balser stabbed and killed the dog to stop it from making noise. The older brother, Christopher, woke up and confronted her during the rampage. Balser told him, "It's not your day," and permitted him to flee the house unharmed. Balser immediately called emergency services and calmly detailed the entire crime to the dispatcher, stating that she had just snapped. During investigations, Balser claimed she acted out of deep resentment and panic over her gender identity. She alleged that her parents were abusive and would never accept her transition from male to female. A psychologist noted that Balser and her father had argued about a transgender individual shortly before the murders. However, her brother and extended family vehemently denied allegations of abuse, publicly calling Balcer's defense an insult to their parents' memory. Because she was just 6 weeks shy of her 18th birthday, prosecutors fought heavily to try her as an adult. In late 2017, a judge officially certified Balcer to be prosecuted through the adult criminal court system due to the severe premeditation of the crime. On December 4, 2018, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Balcer was initially booked into the maximum security all-male Maine State Prison in Warren, Maine. Following a 2021 Maine law requiring state prison to house transgender inmates according to their consistent gender identity, Balcer was transferred on November 29, 2022 to the Women's Pod at the Maine Correctional Center in Windham, Maine. Balcer's presence in the women's facility became a major point of political controversy and legal action. Multiple female inmates filed official grievances accusing the 6'1", 310-pound Balcer of essay, unwanted touching, and issuing violent threats. An inmate filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Maine Department of Corrections, alleging that prison officials ignored complaints from female prisoners and retaliated against those who spoke out against Balcer's housing placement. The controversy drew direct scrutiny from the U.S. Department of Justice. Federal authorities launched formal civil rights investigations into the facility and threatened to strip Maine's prison system of essential federal funding unless Balcer was safely relocated away from the female population. Balcer remains incarcerated under state custody, with her earliest projectable release date factoring in maximum good behavior credits set for July 5, 2051, when she will be 52 years old. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.